The Idries Shah Foundation podcast. Practical Psychology for Today. Featuring the works of Idries Shah, voiced by David Ault. Welcome to the Idries Shah Foundation podcast. In this edition of the podcast, we will hear selections from The Elephant in the Dark by Idries Shah. This audio is made available by the Idries Shah Foundation. The study methods of surrender, of contemplation and abstinence, of the Christian and Muslim surrenderers to God, not only commanded the assent of devotees of both persuasions, as instance Lully's approval of the Sufis and their recitations, but produced a common result, and even, as in the following passages, an almost mysterious identity between some of the greatest Christian and Islamic mystics. It is worth recalling several instances and certain patterns of the interaction and relationship between Muslims and Christians, as recorded in readily available form. Some of the accounts, such as those of Saladin and the Crusaders, or the influence of common searches for knowledge in Arabized Spain, are widely known to readers of all kinds of literature, and even to many who watch films or television documentary programs. Other events and developments are mainly known only in local cultures, and these include the life of Roderigo, the Cid, El Said, and the story of the Christians who fought side by side with the Muslims against the Persian oppressors in the early years of Islam. But there is so much other material, both narrative and literary, that looking through it one could almost call it a pattern or a series of patterns. I have chosen one or two instances and themes to indicate what I mean. One of the Muslim spiritual teachers best known in the West is, of course, Jalaluddin Rumi, 1207–73, the mystic and poet who had Christian and Jewish as well as Muslim followers. We can begin with an account preserved in Aflaki's Munaqib al-Arifin, The Acts of the Adepts, Red House, James W., Legends of the Sufis, Kingston, 1965, about the Persian merchant who sought wisdom, and whom Rumi taught by a striking object lesson. This man of Tabriz came to Konya, Asiatic Turkey, then known as Rum, in search of spiritual teaching, and brought with him 50 sequins as an offering. Aflaki, translated by Red House, continues, "When they reached the college, Jalal was sitting alone in the lecture hall, immersed in the study of some books. The party made their obeisances, and the merchant felt himself completely overpowered at the aspect of the venerable teacher, so that he burst into tears and could not utter a word. Jalal addressed him therefore as follows: The 50 sequins thou hast provided as thy offering are accepted. The cause and reason of thy bygone losses, about which the merchant was concerned, was that on a certain day thou wast in the west of Farangistan, or Europe, where thou wentest into a certain ward of a certain city, and there sawest a poor Farangi, or European, man, one of the greatest of God's cherished saints, who was lying stretched out at the corner of a marketplace. And thou didst pass him by, thou spattest on him, evincing aversion from him. His heart was grieved by thy act and demeanour, hence the visitations that have afflicted thee. Go thou, then, and make thy peace with him, asking his forgiveness, and offering him our salutations." The merchant was petrified at this announcement. Jalal then asked him, "Wilt thou that we this instant show him to thee?" So saying, he placed his hand on the wall of the apartment, and told the merchant to behold. Instantly a doorway opened in the wall, and the merchant thence perceived that man in Farangistan lying down in the marketplace. At this sight he bowed down his head and rent his garments, coming away from the saintly presence in a state of stupor. He remembered all these incidents as facts. Immediately commencing his preparations, he set out without delay, and reached the city in question. He inquired for the ward he wished to visit, and for the man whom he had offended. Him he discovered lying down, stretched out as Jalal had shown him. The merchant dismounted from his beast, and made his obeisance to the prostrate Farangi dervish, who at once addressed him thus: "What wilt that I do? Our Lord Jalal suffereth me not, or otherwise I had a desire to make thee see the power of God, and what I am. But now draw near." The Farangi dervish then clasped the merchant to his bosom, kissed him repeatedly on both cheeks, and then added, "Look now that thou mayest see my Lord and teacher, my spiritual master, and that thou mayest witness a marvel." The merchant looked. He saw the Lord Jalal immersed in holy dance, chanting this hymn and entranced with sacred music. His kingdoms vast and pure, each sort its fitting place finds there. Cornelian, ruby, clod, or pebble be thou on his hill. Believe he seeks thee, disbelieve he'll haply cleanse thee fair. Be here a faithful Abu Bakr, Farangi there at will, of Majorca, whose writings speak approvingly of the Sufis. And Abu Bakr is an orthodox observer of the majority persuasion in Islam, hence contrasted with a Western Christian. It has been asserted that the Frankish dervish was none other than Raymond Lull, or Raymond Lully. It is also related that when Jalal died, the mourners were of all creeds and of various nations. Jews and Christians, Turks, Romans, and Arabians were among them. Each recited sacred passages, according to their several usages, from the law, the Psalms, or the Gospel. The Muslims strove to drive away these strangers. They would not be repelled. A great tumult was the result. The Sultan, the heir apparent, and the Pawana all flew to appease the strife, together with the chief rabbis, the bishops, and abbots, etc. It was asked of these latter, continues the legend, why they mixed themselves up with the funeral of an eminent Muslim sage and saint. They replied that they had learnt from him more of the mysteries shrouded in their scriptures than they had ever known before, and had found in him all the signs and qualities of a prophet and saint as set forth in those writings. They further declared, "If you Muslims hold him to have been the Muhammad of his age, we esteem him as the Moses, the David, the Jesus of our time, and we are his disciples, his adherents." The Muslim leaders could make no answer. He had died as the sun went down on the 16th of December 1272, at 66 solar years of age. Although Al-Ghazali's delineation of the psychic geography of the valleys which we have looked at does not depend for its impact on any knowledge of the Arabic language, and Rumi did not work primarily in Arabic but Persian, yet the influence and inner dimensions of Arabic have always had an importance in the interaction between those whose mother tongue it is, whether they be Muslims or Christians. So I propose to return to this aspect of the understanding of the concept of surrender, to throw what additional light we can upon it in the interests of Christian-Muslim understanding. Al-Ghazali, though born at Tus, in what was known as Khorasan, eastern Persia, near the holy city of Mashhad, used, for the most part, the Arabic language, which was also at that time equally well known to the Eastern Arabian Christians, and very many of the outstanding Christians of Latin Europe, through their contact with and study in the Spanish-Arabian schools. The use of Arabic was an important element in the mutual understanding between Christians and Muslims in many areas of belief and practice, significantly because whole plethoras of meanings, related to the same stem or root, could be deduced by the use of an Arabic word, which showed the relationship of concepts which, when translated into other tongues, lost their inevitable associations. In order to bring this affinity into closer focus, we may look at the groupings of meanings in Arabic which were, for Christian and Muslim Arabs and Arabic speakers, parts of their common heritage. It bears a direct relationship to the sense of surrender as the essence of religious practice, action to surrender, as distinct from ritual seen as an action or from symbolism felt to be equal to action. I am aware that there is a great deal of cultural and outward evidence for the elision of terms or the equating of concepts on a lower level during the Middle Ages. Take, for example, the direct evidence of alignment of thought shown by King Alfonso VIII of Leon and Castile, 1158-1214, in his coinage. His dinar is still extant, with his title given in Arabic as Emir al-Kalutikin, Commander of the Catholics, and the Pope's function defined as Imam al-Baya al-Masihir, leader of the community of the Messiah, Jesus, the Christian Church. Hitty, Professor Philip, History of the Arabs, New York, Macmillan, 1951. The mutual understanding is also very marked in Sicily. Though himself an uncultured Christian, Roger I, died 1101, drew from the Muslims the mass of his infantry, patronized Arab learning, surrounded himself with Eastern philosophers, astrologers, and physicians, and allowed the non-Christian full liberty to follow their rites. Roger maintained the former system of administration and even kept high Muslim officials. His court at Palermo seemed more oriental than occidental. For over a century after this, Sicily presented the unique spectacle of a Christian kingdom in which some of the highest positions were held by Muslims. Hitty, History of the Arabs, New York, Macmillan, 1951. The existence of Sufi saints in Spain, where many Christian scholars of the Middle Ages studied, is witnessed both by copious documentation of their lives and also by books by, for instance, the Spaniard Ibn al-Arabi, one of the greatest Sufi masters. Professor Norman Cohn, among others, has written of the symbiosis theory of Christian-Muslim experimentalism, as well as giving a graphic resume of some of the interchanges between what are almost certainly the wilder elements among both parties. Towards the close of the 12th century, various Spanish cities, and notably Seville, witnessed the activities of mystical brotherhoods of Muslims. These people, who were known as Sufis, were holy beggars, who wandered in groups through the streets and squares, dressed in patched and parti-coloured robes. The novices among them were schooled in humiliation and self-abnegation. They had to dress in rags, to keep their eyes fixed on the ground, to eat revolting foodstuffs, and they owed blind obedience to the master of the group. But once they emerged from their novitiate, these Sufis entered a realm of total freedom. Disclaiming book learning and theological subtleties, they rejoiced in direct knowledge of God. Indeed, they felt themselves united with the divine essence in a most intimate union, and this in turn liberated them from all restraints. Every impulse was experienced as a divine command. Now they could surround themselves with worldly possessions. Now they could live in luxury. And now, too, they could lie or steal or fornicate without qualms of conscience. For since inwardly the soul was wholly absorbed into God, external acts were of no account. It is likely that Sufism, as it developed from the 9th century onwards, itself owed much to Christian mystical sects in the East. In turn, it seems to have assisted the growth of the mysticism of the free spirit in Christian Europe. Certainly, every one of the features that characterized Sufism in 12th century Spain, even to such details as parti-colored robes, were noted to be as typical of the adepts of the free spirit a century or two later. In any case, around 1200, the cult of the free spirit began to emerge as an identifiable heresy in Western Christendom. Cone N. The Pursuit of the Millennium. I am indebted to Robert Cecil, Deputy Chairman, School of European Studies, University of Reading, for this reference. The free spirit heresy in Christianity is perhaps a good example of the application of some Sufic ideas, and even practices, without the necessary discipline. Important though such correspondences undoubtedly are for historical purposes, and there are many of them, there is a deeper level of definition, the linguistic one, where the analysis of concepts brings a flavor of the Muslim feeling for Islam and surrender, and the possibility of the contemporary Christian understanding what this meant to the Muslim, so that he could compare it with his own conceptions. It is, of course, widely known that the name of the religion of the Muslims is Islam, or al-Islam, al being the definite article in Arabic. Islam literally means submission, yielding, surrender to the will of God. Muslim means one who is so surrendered. This etymology is important because it is not just a name, it is a meaning. If you ask many an Arab, "Are you a Muslim?" he will often reply, "If God wills," which is roughly equivalent in colloquial speech to, "I hope so." His attitude is that submission to the will of God is a matter of constant endeavor. Now we must also remember that there is a whole group of words derived from the radical SLM, which is the Arabic concept of surrender, any and all of which, almost, are associated with, regarded as inherently bound up with, each other, and hence with Islam. By observing these words, we gain an idea as to the sense in which Islam has been understood by the people among whom it appeared, in their holy tongue, Arabic. Surrender, then, is Islam. Associated with this is the word salama, or salamat, which means safety, security. This fact is inextricably bound up in thinking with the direct relationship between submission to God and safety, that is, salvation. And salama also stands for wholeness, soundness, faultlessness, to be made whole, safe through submission. Heaven is rendered by the term Dar as-Salam, the abode of peace, safety for man. To salam a person is to wish him peace and wholeness. Salim, having been made whole or sound, is another word from this root, like all the others an integral part of the vocabulary and daily speech of Arabic. See also the discussion on these lines in Shah, Serdar Iqbal Ali, Lights of Asia, London, Arthur Barker, 1934. Now that Islam is regarded as a means, a method of arriving at peace, and heaven is not in doubt either in the exegesis or in the occurrence of the word salam, again from the same root, which stands for an instrument or means, and including such things as a ladder or a stairway, and a tool. Finally, though this by no means exhausts our vocabulary of associated terms, there is istilam, which means receiving, and musalim, one who is peaceful, lenient, clement. It is impossible to exaggerate the significance of this constellation of terms and meanings, For the Arab speaker, they constitute the constant reminder of the diverse aspects of the religion and its meanings, and a permanent facility for confirming these concepts without having to rely upon interpretation by later ideologists. It has even been said by Muslim theoreticians that Islam is a word which denotes submission to the will of God. Therefore, it is not a noun like the name of a thing, but a conception which is the name of a thing as well. It is for this reason that in the Quran, in the passage from chapter 2, verse 136, which I quoted earlier, the sequence ends with the words which can be translated either as, "And to God we are resigned," or "We are Muslims." Islam, as is well known, speaks of the true religious leaders, submitted to the will of God before the time of the Prophet Muhammad, as Muslims. This is not only found in the Quran. I have heard my Afghan co-religionists say often, "Chi khub adam ast in Nasrani, Muslim ast." This means, "What a good man this Christian is, he is a Muslim." Even though these words are in Persian and not in Arabic, the sense is preserved absolutely, having been transferred successfully to an Aryan language from a Semitic one, each having very little similarity one to the other. The Quran itself cannot be translated for this very reason. A part of the meaning will be rendered into the other language, but of course unless that language has, and this seems most unlikely, a constellation of concepts which exactly coincides with those of Arabic, the inbuilt pattern of concepts will inevitably be disturbed. I remember my own father using this very same illustration, employing the example of the radical SLM and its associations, to explain to me when I had just celebrated my 8th birthday in June 1932. He was verifying passages from the rendition of the Quran by Muhammad Ali, and informing me why he was at that moment calling his selection from the Quran. Shah the Sardar Iqbal Ali, Extracts from the Quran, London, Blackie, 1933. The affinity of Christian and Muslim mystics, basing their lives and practices on the conception of the surrender to God, has excited the interest of a very large number of thinkers. I have already lectured on this subject at Sussex University, in a monograph with references reprinted as the introduction to my The Way of the Sufi, London, Cape, 1968 and 1971, and have published some of the references from Western authorities dealing with the question, in The Sufis, London 1964, New York 1964, Paris 1972, and other editions. The product of deep research covering many years, dealing with the Islamic mystics' influence, sometimes claimed to be a determining one in literature, terminology, and practices, on such significant figures as the Blessed Raymond Lull, Roger Bacon, Dante, St. John of the Cross, St. Teresa of Avila, Duns Scotus, and many others, is a matter of record. Virtually all of this work has been done by Christian scholars, literary men, historians of religion, medievalists and Orientalists. C.F. Shah Idries, The Sufis, London 1964. I have quoted, too, Western specialists who have noted even the ultimate elision of functions. The Muslim saint Haji Bektash, identified with Saint Karambalos of the Greeks. In Burge, Dr. J.K., The Bektashi Order of Dervishes, London, Lusac, 1937. The Latin brother Anselm of Termeda, found to be one and the same individual as the Sufi mystic Abdullah et Tarjuman. This podcast is copyright 2016, the Idries Shah Foundation.